Hello everyone, my name is Cedric. Welcome to this long overdue follow-up to my previous video in which I presented the 31 drawings I did for last Inktober and where I also explained a little bit my ideas and concepts behind each one of them. I will leave a link in the description in case you want to go watch that. But in this second part, I will talk about the process and materials I used to create each one of those pieces, using this drawing of an alien gentleman I did as an example. So with that said, let's get going. To start things off, I am drawing on a black Strathmore Artagain paper, which is a fairly smooth paper meant for dry medias, but it actually took ink washes relatively well. The paper did warp a bit, but it wasn't too bad. I managed to flatten the drawing afterwards by misting water on the back of them and putting them under books to dry. And perhaps I would not have had that problem if I had taped my paper correctly and not just in the corner, as you can see here. But for the most part, there is always a way to solve problems when it comes to art, so it's all fine. Anyway, for sketching, I am using a white colored pencil. In this case, it's a Polychromos by Faber Castell. I had already roughly worked out the concept in my sketchbook, so it's just a matter of transferring that to this paper now. It's a simple composition overall, so I am just trying to work out the proportion. But despite the simplicity, I still managed to make the face slightly crooked, I think. But that's always a problem with those kind of symmetrical portraits. And now we get into the inking part. I started by outlining the entire thing with white to really define the drawing. A lot of that will get covered up eventually, but it's helpful for now to know where everything will be. For the ink, I am using acrylic inks, both the Liquitex and Amsterdam brands. I don't have a preference for either of them, as I find them fairly comparable. I just pick whichever one is available at my art store, and that is also less expensive at the time. For the pen, I am using a basic plastic Speedball nib holder with a Hunt number 56 school nib, I believe. That nib is fairly stiff, but it has enough flexibility to get some nice line variation from thin to thick, but I have not really used that aspect of the nib for this drawing. As you can see here, the lines are all fairly even. It's now time to erase the sketch. It erased pretty easily on this paper, but even if it did not, I could have just covered it eventually. And here comes a drafting brush to remove all the eraser crumbs. Now I switch to a brush so I can start to lay out some flattish tones. The brush I am using is a synthetic Raphaël Kaerell No. 4 round brush, which I quite like. I am starting with the lighter parts, using white with a bit of water so that it's not fully opaque, as I want to give myself some room to build some highlights on top of this. And now I am switching to a red color. This red is fairly transparent, so it will need a few layers to really pop. Also, since this paper is not really meant for wet media, it was hard to get flat washes, as it absorbed the ink almost instantly. So I tried my best to use the irregularities it created to my advantage to get a bit of a greedy look, which I think is fitting for this drawing and many of the other ones I did in this Inktober series, since it was all like about Halloween and scary stuff. Here we are moving back to the dip pen, this time using black. As you can see, I am going back over a lot of the white outlines, and also I'm cutting in some finer details in the light washes I made. And this is how I mostly use the black ink in this case. I saw it almost more like an eraser. And the nice thing is that the black ink I use as a matte finish, so it blends fairly well with the black of the paper. So unless you look at the drawing at a certain angle under a light, you won't necessarily notice all the correction I made using the ink, which is pretty nice. And here I go cleaning out some more edges and defining certain areas again. So now I worked on the character a little bit, so it's time for a second layer of red on the background. I believe it's also the last one. As you can see, it already looks much more vibrant with just a second coat. I think that the brighter red gives more punch to the drawing, and now I am also starting to have a better feel for what the whole thing will look like in the end. Which is good because it's hard for me to really visualize things clearly in my head. Things are now mostly all in place, so it's time for rendering, refining, and detailing. It might be the most time-consuming part of the process, but it's something I really like doing. To me, that's where a drawing really starts to come to life. So I begin the process by accentuating the lights using the hatching technique, which is a technique I really love using. It's probably an influence I have from the likes of Junji Ito and Kentaro Miura, both artists I really love. I'm not taking the time to make the hatch marks very precise. Since this was an Inktober drawing, I did not want to spend forever doing this drawing. But I think that fits the roughness I already have going on with this, so it's all fine. And speaking of time, this video is sped up by 5 times. In real time, I think it took me just a bit more than an hour to complete, which is fairly quick for me. I think I tend to be a slower artist in general, so I sometimes wish I could really draw this quickly, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. And as you can see, I'm going all around the white areas, just hatching away. And it's quite a meditative process for me, so even if it can be a bit tedious, I don't mind doing it too much. Here I am going back to the brush to accentuate some of the black areas. It's just easier to get flat shapes with it than trying to fill the same shapes with using the pen. I also use it to create the air, as a brush can make different types of strokes than the ones you can get with a pen, which hopefully helps differentiate the hair from the hatch marks I have going on. I am also covering the white outlines from the vest so they don't stand out too much. I think here I am cleaning up my brush and picking up my pen, and yes, I was. So using white, I am adding a bit of hatching to the vest. I try to keep my hand light so that the strokes are not too thick and bright. I still want the vest to read as black in the end. And now I do the same on the hat. I think I went a bit strong here, but I believe I will correct that eventually. And we're switching colors again, this time using red. I am using the red to outline some of the black section, as I think the edges got lost a little bit, but I felt like the white would be too harsh for that. It also ended up working as kind of a reflected light, especially in the eyes, so that's a pretty cool effect. And while I have the red, I am also reinforcing the band on the hat, as it wasn't bright enough for my taste. And here I'm cleaning up some edges. Now it's back to white to add some highlights on the hair. At this point in the process, there is a lot of push and pull happening, so I switch between different colors and areas as I notice new things I want to change or correct. Here I'm switching back to black to clean up some of the edges. I believe I also start to attenuate the light on the hat by hatching with black over the white hatch marks. I'm also reinforcing some of the shadows using more hatching again on the face, and I'm also defining the features a little bit more. Like I said earlier, by this point I am just moving all over the drawing, adding and correcting things as I notice them. So it will maybe get a bit repetitive to watch, but it's a good sign, as that means that the drawing is nearing the end by now. Meanwhile, I just keep hatching away. Here I just toned down the white hatching of the vest and the hat some more by hatching with black on top of them. And I also decided now to accentuate the brow of the character a little bit because I felt it would give him, well, more character. And now we're back to red. I keep cleaning up the edges and reinforcing the outlines I made previously. It's needed since the red I'm using is more transparent than the white and black. Speaking of which, the red ink I am using is Pyrrole Red from Amsterdam. My black is Black Oxide, also from Amsterdam. And the white is Titanium White from Liquitex. And I keep cleaning up the edges here. And a quick switch to black again for more cleanup, adding more hatching and reinforcing some of the features still. At this point, it's a question of how much more I want to refine this. I probably could have stopped earlier and it would have been okay, just like I could probably keep going for a while if I felt like it. It's always up to the artist to decide when is the right time to stop. And it's brush time again! This time I am using black ink mixed with water to create a semi-transparent wash. My goal here is to create some lighter shadows, so I don't want them to be completely flat black. I think this really added more dimension to the portrait, especially since that the hat is now casting a shadow on the face which had 3-dimensionality. You can really notice the transparency on the wash on his shirt, where it ends up being more of a light gray. And as it's been the case for the last few minutes, I go around the whole drawing and add more of this wash as I notice places where I want to add more of it. I am quickly picking up the pen once again, using black to refine the edges once more, and adding little touches here and there where it's needed. Pushing and pulling as always. And here is the brush again for what I believe will be its final apparition in this video. I am using it with white straight out of the bottle to make the final highlights. So that means we are in the final stages now, which is always exciting. And as always, I go around the face trying to think of which part would catch the light the most. And I think this step is the step that really brings the sense of volume up in the face. I also paint over the shirt to really bring out its whiteness. And here's the highlight on the eyes, which really brings them to life in my opinion. And now I'm moving to the hat and the vest now. I try to keep my hand light again to not make them too bright, but I kind of failed here. So I use my finger to smudge the ink a bit. I don't use my fingers a lot when painting, but they can be quite convenient in some situation like this case. Just make sure you clean your hands afterwards, because that's important. I keep reinforcing the lights on the vest, maybe a bit too much, but I believe I will correct that in the next step. So some more highlights on the hair now. And we're gonna move back to the pen. Once again, using black, I am putting some hatching over the highlighted areas of the hat and the vest, where I got a bit too heavy-handed, in order to tone those down. And there is always a way to correct mistakes in art, like I said earlier, so don't be afraid to try things. Now I'm doing some last touch-ups, and I think this will be the end. So we are back in real time now, for the most important part, which is the signature. So that means we are at the end of the process. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough and maybe you learned a thing or two along the way. Here's the final drawing. I will show a better scanned version of it in a few seconds, so if you like this video, go watch my previous one where I went through the 31 drawings I made for Inktober last year. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and stay creative.